when I was looking at the guidelines, I was actually finding more on which guidelines were not applicable, because you fell into most of the guidelines require showing that you need to get a more severe sentence than otherwise. This offense was planned, premeditated, carried out meticulously. The minor was lured by a trusted person to her death. She was violently defiled and buried. Were it not for intervention of a hawk-eyed officer who definitely deserves a promotion, we'll never have known. The offense, you devoured the minor, you ruptured her, leading her to severe hemorrhage after boring copious amount of spermatozoa in the ruptured vagina of the minor. You then proceeded to strangle the minor by smothering her. The minor died of asphyxiation due to suffocation under excruciating pain as described by the convict himself. The pain suffered by the minor cannot be fathomable. It is beyond human understanding. Describing the convict as a beast will be an understatement. The offense was aggravated by unnecessary use of sexual violence. The convict abused a position of trust. He did not exercise any restraint. The minor, 7-year-old minor, was subjected to inhuman treatment, and inhuman and unusual treatment. The 7-year-old victim was degraded by not only being violently defiled, but also being buried in a shallow grave without a coffin, a decent burial inside a house, to remain as an unmarked grave. By meting out cruel and inhuman treatment of the minor, the convict voluntarily stepped outside constitutional protection of his own life. Let me translate. Kwa kufanya mtoto vile ulimfanya, ulitoka kwa ile self protection of your own life. Nimeangalia kwamba femicide is on the rise in the country, and it is so because people think that murder is a safer offense than sexual crimes where people get life sentence. And a sentence that then is commensurate with what you did must then be meted out. Ulijaribu kuficha ushahidi wa kuzika mtoto kwa nyumba, and in all places nyumba yako mwenyewe, hakuna mwingine angejua uko hapo ndani. That concealment ilikuwa complete, were it not that PC woman Atieno and CCTV conspired against you, haungepatikana. And the impact on the victim also ilikuwa kubwa sana. The primary victim was a deceased, the secondary was the grandparents and the surviving community. The emotional trauma is permanent. The fear is much. The court heard directly from one of the victims whose testimony was heartfelt and deeply distressing. The probation report was filed. All interviewees recommended a severe sentence. Wale wote waliulizwa kwa probation walisema upewe adabu kali sana. Although walisema kwamba ulikuwa umeomba msamaha, nilikuangalia kotini wakati mama anaongea. Wakati alikuwa anaongea ulikuwa umekaa tu, either una smile ama unaangalia tu kwa hewa. Au kuwa na huruma yote. You were in some moment of deja vu. Instead ya wewe kusema kwamba unataka sentence, si kuona ukisikia uchungu wa wale wengine wamesikia. You had a disturbing lack of empathy. Ilikuwa ni kwamba ulienjoy ama ulipenda ile vitu ulifanya. So the other thing niliona kwamba hii hii makosa ilikuwa in furtherance of gender-based violence and sexual violence. One of the things I noted is that the minor, that is very decisive. The minor hemorrhaged. You didn't care. Huku, yani mtoto aliraruka kabisa 2.5 centimeters by 3 centimeters, but you still continued. You're 35-year-old. I was not there, but the uchungu mtoto alifikiria, nikisoma ile convention uliandika, it is almost like an excerpt from a horror movie. We'll thank Jadel or the spares who had installed a CCTV. Waliweka CCTV yenye ilikuonyesha kuna mtoto. Au kuangalia umuhimu wa maisha, sanctity of human life and vulnerability of children. So in a defilement itself, which the DPP still has a chance to charge you with, attracts a life sentence. So if I give you a life sentence, it then doesn't make any difference whether you defiled and left her or you defiled and killed her. There were 4 factors niliangalia, and nikaachwa na there was no other choice that the court had. One of them was that the killing was a child, and a child of 10 years. Secondly, it was mtu mwenye alikuwa na a person who was trusted. Thirdly, this was gender violence, and lastly, there was sexual violence. The manner of killing was most remarkable, in the most remarkable sense. Sexual violence was disproportionate to the age of the victim. The vaginal ligaments were violently torn by penile entry with discharge of copious amount of spermatozoa, with a long and endurance exercise where mercy and compassion were not felt. I need him to know that. God is unable to discern any role played by the devil. The Lord does not recognize claim to supernatural powers. In this instance, the devil is innocent. You showed a deeply depraved deposition. There was no evidence that you were suffering from any mental incapacity. You were found fit. You returned to your house and stayed inside there, knowing it's a cemetery. That conduct underscores a disturbing level of moral depravity and aggravates the gravity of the offense. The tone and content of the confession project an unsettling detachment, evincing traits with consistent cruelty and self-absorption. Overall, it presents a portrait of an individual whose actions and expressed sentiments demonstrates lack of absence of empathy and narcissistic tendencies. The post-mortem report revealed multiple injuries indicating significant trauma. There was a lesion on the left maxillary region of the face, abrasions with both the left and right orbital areas. The disease sustained multiple abrasions on oral mucosa, affecting lower lips, the gum, and the left aspect of the mouth. In addition, examination disclosed genital injuries, including broken hymen, a vaginal opening of 2.3 by 2, together with a vaginal tear and lacerations. Let me explain what this means. What it means is that even when you are trying to keep her quiet, she was resisting. She had injuries in the mouth. Aliumia kumdomo na alifunguliwa kwa sehemu zake za siri kwa nguvu. Although you pleaded guilty, that plea of guilty did not by itself remove the severest of the sentences from the table. It's a good thing to save judicial time. But however, the courts also are here to hear cases. So the mere fact that the court was saved of time of hearing does not, by and of itself, shorten the sentences. We are here to hear you, and if you chose to plead guilty, it is useful in smaller cases. But for murder and for defilement, it doesn't help. I've set out the rules that we rely on. I've then now gone to look at the two sentences that possibly you can give. I've looked at the life sentence, and I saw that, and what it means. I've also seen the other sentence, the death sentence, which is short, and which I will be concerned with most. Proceed. The convict chose a path that now led to destruction. He had utter disregard of human life. Convicts decided to steal the innocence of TPK, destroy both her body and lives of secondary victims, and kill her. The convict must surely reap what he sowed to please his flesh and cause the death of a child. This brought himself within the meaning of Article 26(3) of the Constitution, which provides a person shall not be deprived of his life intentionally, except to the extent authorized by law. Section 204 of the Penal Code authorizes that, and Section 69 of the Prisons Act provide on how that is to be done. The Prisons Act provides this way. When any person is sentenced to death, he shall be hanged by the neck until he is dead, and the sentence shall be carried out in a manner as the commissioner shall direct. Section 204 provides that the sentence for murder is death. There have been no mitigating factors demonstrated that will remove the death penalty from consideration. Carefully weighed the mitigation tendered against aggravating factors. The offense was committed against a 7-year-old in circumstances involving grave breach of trust reposed in the convict as a friend of the family. The conduct was abhorrent, despicable, and marked by extreme violence. In view of the circumstances, and having considered the law and the objectives of sentencing, the court finds that the ultimate penalty remains available and applicable. The sentence must reflect the offense, denounce the conduct in the strongest term, and protect the society, and serve as a deterrent measure. Therefore, accordingly, I find that you are hereby sentenced to death. A death warrant shall be transmitted to the competent authority for signing and carrying out of the sentence after 30 days stay of execution. You have 14 days to appeal, and I close the file. Sorry.
And it's Mr. Mwema.